In today's video, we continue on with our NHL season preview series. Today, we're working our way through the Pacific Division, and we're looking at the Seattle Kraken. After a couple of disappointing years and a couple of coaching changes, will this be the year we see the Kraken get back to the playoffs? We'll discuss how the team has changed, what should we expect from them, and more coming up next. Well, welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we continue our season preview series and our look at the teams in the Pacific Division. Today we look at the newest team in the NHL, the Seattle Kraken. Of course, they now have a 4-year history. It's hard to imagine, but they've already completed 4 NHL seasons so far. In this past year, we've seen another coaching change, another disappointing year after a couple of years ago where they really looked like they were taking a big step forward. But we're going to recap last year, both as a team and some of the top individual performances. We're going to look at their cap space, how the team has changed, additions, subtractions, take a look at any rookies that will impact this roster this year, any contract extensions that could make news for the team throughout the year, any trades we see happening. Then we'll look at their projected lineup and look at the top questions facing this team to see what our expectations are going into the 25-26 regular season. So recapping last year quickly, they had a 76-point campaign, 35, 41, and 6. So again, all the way down in the Pacific Division, not a great season. Of course, they weren't dead last, but they certainly, were down there, not only the team ahead of the San Jose Sharks. The Kraken had a poor season. It was Dan Bylsma's first season behind the bench, and in fact, it's going to be his only season behind the bench with this team. And I'm not really completely sure, to be honest, that I didn't know that was really a fair move. Bylsma had been with the Kraken for a few years, did great things with their AHL team, and a lot of those players, some of which have already kind of graduated to the big leagues, and obviously, some of which will continue to graduate to the NHL over the next little while here. I thought he was just in a spot where the roster was kind of the problem, and I thought he ended up taking the fall here after only one season. They've gone through too many coaches and a team that's only 4 years old. They scored 245 goals last year, 16th best in the league, so that was okay. Goals against, though, was a bit of a problem. 262 against for 24th best. Of course, as a team that was notably out of the playoffs down the stretch for the trade deadline. They did trade some of their veteran players that were going to be likely not returning or on shorter term contracts, expiring deals. Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand ended up going to Tampa. Brandon Tanev went back to his old roots with the Winnipeg Jets. So they made a few moves to kind of shred some contracts that way. Going into this year, like I said, they had only made the playoffs once. It was in year 2 of their existence. So their playoff streak now sits at missing for the past 2 years, and they keep taking, seems like, notable steps backwards. Back in their second year, they were a 100-point team and made the playoffs and won a round, but it just seemed like that year everything that needed to go right went right. So many players had career years. The shooting percentage was abnormally high. It was just one of those, I'm not calling it a fluke, but sometimes you just have everything line up and everything kind of go your way. And I knew that it was going to be really tough for them to sustain that. I didn't think it was going to be such big steps back, though, 2 consecutive years in a row with a lot of these younger players kind of building themselves up to hopefully be better and better. Leading the team last year in scoring was Jared McCann with 61 points. Chandler Stevenson, of course, was his first year with the club, was number 2 in scoring with 51 points. Jaden Schwartz with 49. Shane Wright had his best season to date with 44 points. Took some big steps towards developing not only into a regular everyday player, but a much more effective and productive one. Matty Beniers, though, 43 points last year. His rookie season was his best year to date. Beniers has not really been the point producer and the player that they were hoping for. And I'm not saying he can't get there. I think he can. He's a talented kid, but after the rookie season that he had, it's hard to wrap your head around how the last few years have not been as good for him. 43 points last year. So even Shane Wright, who I think, looking at the last year or two, nobody would have projected that Wright would already be ahead of Beniers in production by this point. Brandon Montour rounds things out with 41 points his first year in Seattle. Proved to be an excellent free agent signing last year. Stevenson, for that matter, did put up good numbers. I was critical of the Stevenson contract. I still think they gave him a little bit too much money in term, but at least he's playing well and giving them some good minutes and decent production for what he is getting paid. Going into the season here, after all the offseason moves are completed, they still have a decent amount of cap space. They have $4.6 million. Of course, like I said, Dan Bylsma as a one and done as head coach. They did keep some other members of the staff, including Jessica Campbell on, but the new head coach is Lane Lambert. Of course, he's had an opportunity to be a head coach recently with the New York Islanders. After a couple of years there, he was dismissed. Lane was a long-time assistant coach, I kind of referred to him as a Barry Trotz disciple, if you will. Worked with Trotz for a long time as an assistant coach. Before he became the head coach of the Islanders, after Trotz's departure, he had an opportunity. Like, he was one of those veteran assistant coaches that was getting a lot of looks around the NHL, and eventually got his opportunity there with the Islanders, and of course worked with the Maple Leafs last year as an assistant coach again, and now here he is, the head coach of the Seattle Kraken. So we'll see how things go in that front. Now let's look at how the team has changed through the offseason, and to be honest, it's really not substantial. For a team that had 76 points last year, they didn't really do anything too earth-shattering. I mean, the only notable subtractions are Andre Burakovsky and Mikey Yzerman. Now, of course, like I said, though, they did also have a sell-off at the deadline. So Gord, Bjorkstrand, Tanev all departed. Then that continued afterwards with Burakovsky and Yzerman. New to the team this year, they did pick up Mason Marchment from the Dallas Stars. Of course, the Dallas Stars were in a little bit of a salary cap pickle, if you will, and they kind of helped them out and took Marchment off their hands. Obviously not really having to give up anything, which was, anything of substance at least, was important. Marchment can give you some, I think he has potential to be a decent secondary scoring type of guy, and can be just really annoying and tough to play against. So might help them add a new element to their roster. They also bring in Freddie Gaudreau, who can provide some depth at the center ice position. Ryan Lindgren comes over after, of course, longtime New York Ranger. Had a spurt there with the Avalanche. Contract was expiring and get a better deal from the Kraken. Lindgren's a, defensive defenseman. Not really much offense there. But typically, blocks a lot of shots, plays a lot in the penalty kill, can be, pretty decent in his own end, but his body has taken a beating with the style of play that Ryan Lindgren plays and provides out there. I do wonder about his long-term longevity here. Like, how long can he continue playing at a higher level? So I think there were some concerns there from the Avalanche and the Rangers, which is why he was available. They also brought in goaltender Matt Murray to add some extra depth to the goaltending situation. Now, looking at, this team from a rookie standpoint, are there any rookies that we can really expect to have an impact on this team? There's not a lot that I expect to have an impact on the NHL level, but I do see some guys that we definitely want to monitor and could be big parts of this team moving forward, and I suspect we'll get an opportunity to at least get some action this year. Like, obviously, Yanni Neiman will be the main one that contributes. I think he has an opportunity, leg up based on his performance last year to be a regular, but certainly some young talent like Jaeger Furcus, who spent the year in the minors, Berkeley Catton, and of course, top pick from last year, Jake O'Brien. I don't expect O'Brien to make the NHL, but Berkeley Catton and Jaeger Furcus, I wouldn't be shocked if they saw some opportunities here. I mean, I do think long term they have potential to be. I mean, they were drafted with a lot of talent. Both had really solid runs in junior, so I'll be curious to see how those two guys perform at the pro level here once they get more of an opportunity. As far as trades go, I mean, there's definitely a few players that are questionable for their futures. I looked at goaltender Philip Grubauer, who's still there. He's lost his job as a starting netminder, and he makes a lot of money, so it doesn't really make sense for him, in my opinion, to be a highly paid backup. But I know that the Kraken obviously were not fond of the numbers and how it would work out to do a buyout this offseason, so they chose not to do that. If they can find a way to move on from that contract, I think they'll take it. Obviously, some guys like Jaden Schwartz and Jared McCann, I'm not absolutely convinced that they're going to be traded. But the fact is that they're veteran players, are on expiring contracts, and they can be productive people who can help other teams. So they will definitely get interest until they reach a point of deciding if they're going to sign them or not. They could be trade deadline pieces this year that make sense for a lot of other teams, or maybe the Kraken decide to hang on to them. They're guys that will kind of, for me at least, fall into my trade bait and extension categories. I wouldn't be shocked if it goes either way. Right now, I think the team has an interest on retaining them, but I think a lot of that is going to depend on how the season goes. I mean, if they sign either of them early on, then maybe that'll be a bit of a surprise. But another defenseman, too, that I wouldn't be shocked if he was moved, would be Jamie Alexiak. That's a possibility. Not a given, but I wouldn't be shocked if that happened this year. As far as other players that could be in the extension category, I do think, Captain Jordan Eberle. Wouldn't be shocked if they did a short extension with him for, another year or two. Eeli Tolvanen's been a nice pickup as well, and he's in the last year of his deal, so he also could be extended during the season as well to go along with Schwartz and McCann. But like I said, I think those guys are... I don't know where the team is at with it, but if it were me, I'd probably take the wait-and-see approach and see how things go and see how this team looks. And if it's trending to be out of the playoffs again, then you need to ask yourself some hard questions if you really need to do more changes here. Like, to be fair, I haven't really been overly fond of Ron Francis's job with this team. I thought the expansion draft was not done well at all. They've definitely made some critical mistakes and some questionable moves. I know Jason Butterell takes over as general manager, but he was the assistant to Ron Francis, and Francis will still have a say here being president of the team operations on the hockey side. So I'm not really sure we've really got a change there. You can be, and this is just my brutal honesty here, you can be, like Francis did a horrible job in my opinion, but yet he gets promoted. So, I just don't understand how that goes. Like, they've gone through coaches like crazy, but yet the management doesn't seem to have any kind of, no repercussions for not getting a better roster in place when they've had plenty of opportunities. So we'll see. Now, here's their projected lineup as of right now, according to dailyfaceoff.com. Of course, between the pipes, no surprise, Joey Decord, Philip Grubauer will be your starting goaltending tandem, with Decord having the reins as the starting goaltender this year. On the back end for the defense, you're looking at likely a pair of Vince Dunn and Adam Larson. Your next pair would be Brandon Montour and Jamie Alexiak. And rounding things out, you're going to get a third pair likely of Ryan Lindgren and Riker Evans. Like I said, though, I do think it's possible you could see a little bit further turnover on this decor, with maybe a player like Alexiak possibly getting moved sometime during the season. In the forward group, you'd need to see a top line, ideally, of Matty Beniers with Jaden Schwartz and Kaapo Kakko. Kakko's been a nice pickup since he came over from the Rangers. They need Beniers, though, to produce more. Chandler Stevenson likely centers your second line with Jared McCann and Jordan Eberle. I suspect they'll continue running Shane Wright as the third center with Mason Marchment and Eeli Tolvanen. And then you've got fourth line likely of Gaudreau, Cartier, and Neiman. So, the fourth line, I'm not sure what to expect from them, but the depth does look decent here. But a lot of this really boils down to what kind of production you can get from some of these players. Now, having guys like McCann or Schwartz playing for contracts might just be a good thing to help improve their production, or at least keep them steady. I'm not saying improve, because they had decent years last year, but now they're playing for contracts. So I'll be a little bit surprised if we see a dip on their side, but that is what things look like right now. The top questions, though, for me, the biggest question on this franchise going into the season that we need to know the answer to see how successful they're going to be is, can Matty Beniers be a true number one center and be like a 75, 80 point player? Considering where he's at in his career, he should be getting close to being, I would think close to a point per game level if he's going to be a true number one. And, maybe he turns out not to be. Maybe he's more of a 2-3. But if you're going to be, 40, 50 points, that's not number one center caliber. That's at most a number two center, maybe a 3, right? So, he put up close to, I think it was his rookie season. I don't have it right in front of me, but I know he was right around the 70-point mark. So if he could do that as a rookie, and this team theoretically should be better now, and he's got more experience, he should be able to do that again. So Benir's performance here, I mean, he was, a really high pick. I think Ron Francis, when he picked him, saw a lot of himself. Like, he does project to be a pretty good two-way centerman as well. And you know what? If Beniers doesn't have to be like an elite level number one center, but if he can be a really good number two that can be a solid two-way player and give you even 70 points consistently, that's a win. That's okay. Maybe Shane Wright becomes the player that he was expected to be when he was like 16, 17. All right. And maybe he becomes that number one center and becomes a point per game player. Like, he took a big step last year at 44 points. Maybe that'll continue. Maybe this year he can get 60, 70 points. We'll have to wait and see. But the evolution of these two players, they're riding and banking on a lot for this team's success. So if you can get like McCann and Schwartz kind of, being consistent, if Stevenson can be similar to last year, and then if you can get, Wright taking another step to add another 15, 20 points to his totals, and if Beniers can get back to what he was as a rookie, then you're going to have a chance to be more successful. So obviously, like I said, those two guys and their roles this year are going to be critical. The next big question for me is, can Lane Lambert really, is he going to be that much of a difference maker as a coach? He's been a pretty defensive-minded coach throughout his tenure in the NHL. So, obviously, the goals against last year were a problem. So I can see how he might be a good replacement to help fix that. But are they going to end up losing goals to make up for it? Like, you often see teams when they really need to focus on cutting down the goals against, sometimes they struggle with the offense for a while they're correcting and playing a different style of game. So that's a big question for me, is if they can cut down on the goals against, but that's great. But if they're already only average when it comes to goal scoring, they can't really afford for that to take a step backwards. So I wonder if this is going to be more than a 1 year, rebound. Can this year they cut down on the goals against, and maybe next year they need to continue playing that way if they can cut it down and then kind of learn to get the offense back in it. I don't know. It's hard to see major improvements on both sides in one season like that. And you don't really need to improve a lot on the offense, but if you're going to be a playoff team, it needs to probably improve a little bit, while the goals against and the defensive side of the metrics need to improve a decent amount. So it's going to be tough. I'm not sure they can do it all in 1 year. Can they be better? They can. They do have some talent, but like I said, a lot of, for me, and how this team does is riding on their young guys and how much of a step they can take. But for me, the Seattle Kraken likely aren't a playoff team this year. I think they will miss again. At least that's my thoughts and predictions here so far. I think there's just too many teams in that division, whether you're talking about Edmonton or Vegas or Los Angeles. Heck, even teams like Calgary and Vancouver, even Anaheim. I'm not sure that they're going to be able to get really much further ahead in the standings than they were this past year. So we'll see. And San Jose is getting better all the time too. So it's not good news for the Kraken. It's going to be tough. They got a lot of work to do, and we'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts on the Kraken for the upcoming 25-26 season. We'll discuss further in the comments. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. Plenty more teams to come in this series, and of course, all the daily news and rumors from around the entire NHL. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.